Hello there, everybody. Isaac the New Backwoodsman here, coming at you with a little story from history today. An event that happened on this day in history, 1759. So, October 4th, posting this video, October 4th, 2022, on an event that happened October 4th, 1759. Now, 1759, the French and Indian War had been going on for several years. Started in 1755, and they call it the 7 Years' War. So it lasted till about 1762. So towards the end of the war, but still lots of conflict going on. Now, there was a company of men under the command of Major Robert Rogers, who patrolled all over New York and into New England and up into Canada, a lot of times behind enemy lines, doing all sorts of daring deeds and adventures, and a lot of violence and a lot of savagery on what was the American frontier at the time. Yes, the frontier was once places like New York and New Hampshire, places that are well populated on the eastern seaboard of the United States today, was then the western frontier of the English New World, anyways. So, Robert Rogers and his men, a lot of the time, pull up a map here, were centered around Lake George in New York. This long lake here, it's about 32 miles long in real life. At the southern end, you got Fort William Henry, which you may know from the movie and book Last of the Mohicans. Definitely some savage events that took place there. And up here, Fort Carillon, later named by the British Ticonderoga, which you will hear again later in American history. Then up here, in the tip of Lake Champlain, was Crown Point, called by the British Fort Saint Frédéric by the French. Now, in September of 1759, well, actually, let's go back to August, and even before that, we'll say at least 20 years before that, there was attacks on the New England and New York frontier by the Abenaki Indian tribe from a place up here called St. Francis, up on the St. Lawrence River. Well, close to it anyway. It's over here. It runs up into this Lake Saint Pierre. Now, the Abenaki Indians would come and raid and take prisoners from British settlements in New England, kill people. Definitely took a lot of captives as well. And they've been doing that for many, many years on the frontier. And the Abenaki tribe joined up with the French during the war and continued raiding and pillaging and fighting the English and all that. So, in August of 1759, a man named Captain Kennedy set out from Crown Point to try to go up here to St. Francis and deal with the Abenaki tribe. And he was kind of trying to convert them to the English, not really attack them. But the Abenaki held Captain Kennedy captive. So, a month later in September, when Captain Kennedy didn't return, Robert Rogers headed out from Crown Point here with about 200 Rangers and others he recruited, including some Stockbridge Indians, also known as the Mohicans. And they took some canoes up north Lake Champlain and stopped here and hid the canoes at Mississippi Bay, wherever you pronounce that. Now, on a modern map, this Lake Champlain is kind of the border of like New York and Vermont and up here's Canada, to give you some perspective of our modern world. And also, about that same time, the English took over Quebec City in a large battle, which, probably up here somewhere off the map. And the French army wasn't really defeated at the battle. They mostly escaped, and they were roaming all over that area there, right where Major Rogers and his men were going. So instead of going a more direct, straight route, because, shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, they had to go all the way up here. This dotted line, that's their route. And this is sprucey, swampy bogs all through here. And the Rangers didn't fare too well. They lost a lot of guys to injury, illness, some attack from the French and Indians during that time. But eventually, on October the 3rd, they made it to St. Francis up here, scouted it out. Now, set this book down for a moment. So, St. Francis, the Abenaki village. The Abenakis had been converted to Catholicism by the French at some point, probably from Jesuit missionaries in years prior, called The Black Rose. There's a good movie. It has been on Amazon Prime. I'm sure it's still there. It's called Black Robe, about the French Jesuit missions throughout Canada in the 17th century. That movie takes place, but real events that happened. So these Indian tribes had converted to Catholicism. Maybe not fully, because they were still pretty barbaric and did some tribal things, such as ritual torture, taking scalps, and all that. So Major Rogers and a few guys went into the village of St. Francis, which was pretty European looking, with houses and even a church, and scouted it out. Most of the warriors in the village were gone, because there was been word out that this troop of English soldiers was roaming around the countryside. So, and all those French soldiers who had left Quebec City, they were looking for them. They knew these people were around somewhere and weren't quite sure what target they were hitting. Now, let me get that map back out. So, St. Francis was the target, but the French were thinking it was maybe this town here, Yamaska. Yeah, they were a little off, which was very unfortunate for what was to come. Around dawn, October 4th, 1759. Rogers and his Rangers took some stuff kind of like this, tomahawks, probably a long knife like that, went into the town, slaughtered the people of St. Francis in their sleep. Men, warriors, women, and children, too. The Rangers put them to death. Now, you may think, what bastards? But you gotta understand war on the frontier. These people, the Abenakis, did the same thing to people that these Rangers probably knew. They burned homes, killed entire families on the frontier. This was vengeance. It was even personal for Major Rogers, whose brother was killed at Fort William Henry. Well, actually, he wasn't killed. I'm sorry. He died of disease at Fort William Henry. But when that fort fell, Major Rogers, who was a well-known name at this time, he had his name in print all over the newspapers of colonial America. Major Rogers brother's grave was dug up by the Abenakis. Body mutilated, scalp taken. So this was personal for Major Rogers, and he put many people to the death and took their scalps. And, you know, another good reason that Rogers Rangers took those scalps was when they were in St. Francis, the homes of these people. You know how, some people have like decorative flags outside their house, this time of year. Get a flag, it's pumpkin season, happy fall. These Abenakis had scalps, English scalps, men, women, and children, hanging outside their homes like flags. About 600 of them. 600 scalps hanging outside their homes. So, was it right? I don't know. But it was revenge. And it did help the cause of the English and the American people who lived on the frontier. Because St. Francis and the Abenakis were never the same after that. Now, after that took place, they burned everything, stole some fancy silver relics and stuff from the church there, and word got out pretty quick that it was Major Rogers, the well-known ranger, who did this. And the French and the other Abenaki warriors, they came fast. So Major Rogers couldn't go back the way he came. Well, not looking right. He couldn't go back the way he came and the way he wanted to go this way. Down Lake Champlain, or even back through that little swamp. They were out of food. They were starving already, because it took a couple of weeks to get through that bog, even to get to St. Francis. But they had to take this huge roundabout way through the wilderness, through the swamps, all the way down here to what was known as Fort Number 4. I believe it is in modern day New Hampshire. Just to give it modern geographic perspective. I could be wrong. It could be Vermont, but I think it's New Hampshire over here. I don't know. They're both small and skinny. But anyways, this route was treacherous. Rogers Rangers were being harassed by French and Indians the whole way. They had this, and they were starving. Some survival situations. People say, "Oh, you can last a month without food." You can, maybe, but you're not gonna like it. And do you have any idea how many calories they would be spending? On this, from starting point, Crown Point, up here to St. Francis. That's a solid 200 miles on a straight line. And just look at, that long arc and curve. Let's just add another 100 miles to that trip. Walking. No horses through that thick wilderness. Rogers had to divide his rangers into 3 separate groups. A lot of guys did not make it. It's said that even some had to resort to cannibalism on the way down to Fort Number 4. But eventually, Major Rogers made it back to fight another day. So, there you have your history story for the day. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you want to learn a little more about Major Rogers, the French and Indian War, often a forgotten war, they call it. Right now, reading this book, White Devil. True story war, savagery, and vengeance in colonial America. I think I used some of those words in this video. What a coincidence. But anyway, great book so far. I also listened to an audiobook about Robert Rogers. It's called War on the Run. You can find these books on Amazon. I was lucky enough to find this at my local used bookstore for extra cheap. So check out your local used bookstore. Check out Amazon, Audible. That's where the audiobook was from. Learn more about Robert Rogers, who was a great American hero, later fell from grace, but that's for another video. See you next time.